Warm greetings, everyone. On behalf of W4W Foundation, a think tank instituted as a citizens collective, we welcome you to another session of Wednesdays for Water. The conversation today is on the hype and reality of national inland waterways in Indian rivers. Before we discuss the session, let me just take you through what is W4W Foundation and what do we do at Wednesdays for Water. Wednesdays for Water is our signature series actually. And the objective of the Wednesdays for Water is to engage in conversation with water experts, grassroots practitioners, policymakers, and youth to explore the complex intertwined issues associated with water and the possible solutions. It has expanded since then to have more activities like Friday Waters and Monday Munching with Women for Water, besides organizing water workshops, water walk and talks, seminars, special courses, and conference panels to continue the water conversation in various possible ways. Please visit our website www.w4w.in for more details. And I just want to make an upfront announcement that W4W is also going to be present this time at World Water Week on 25th, where we present our ongoing research on disasters and distress and impact on women. My name is Mansee Bal Bhargava, and I'm the moderator and host for the session representing W4W Foundation. In today's session, hype and reality of national inland waterways in Indian rivers, we all know that it has a significant role to play. However, I think we also need to understand its environmental aspects and also pertaining to pollution, both as water pollution, noise pollution, air pollution, and all kinds of aspects around it, and especially what kind of infrastructure we hold towards it. According to the Ministry of Shipping, as of 2021, around 5,000 kilometers of country's vast network of rivers and canals are commercially navigable. I'm not going to go into details of it because we have wonderful speakers lined up today. But what is important for us at W4W to understand is that this is a first session on inland waterways. And we are really keen to understand what it is, what it does actually in terms of with water, as well as in terms of economy. What are the gaps? What kind of environmental issues are raising there? What kind of standardized operations which are there in navigation, and so on and so forth. Importantly, how the optimism is balanced around inland navigation and what kind of crucial successful implementation, if there is any, can be looked through, and what do we learn from the mistakes which have been done over the years. In today's session, we have Avli, Verma, and Shripad Dharmadhikary as speakers and Yogesh Upadhyay as discussant. So I'm going to invite Avli as our first speaker, but before I invite to her, I'm going to also tell a brief bio of hers. Avli is a researcher at Manthan Adhyayan Kendra, where she has been examining the development of India's inland waterways program for the past 6 years. Her work focuses on understanding the social ecological impacts of emerging infrastructure projects on river ecosystems and enhancing accountability and environmental governance in the sector. She holds an MPhil in Planning and Development from IIT Bombay and has an MSc in Environmental Science from JNU, New Delhi. So with this little bio, may I invite Avli to really share her thoughts and insights on what exactly is inland waterways, where do we stand in India, and what are we doing and not doing for that matter. Over to you, Avli. Thank you so much for taking our time.
Thank you, Mansee, for the introduction and also for the opportunity to present our work on the national inland waterways. Is my slide visible?
Not yet.
Is it visible now?
Yes, it's moving as well. Go ahead.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry for the interruption. So Manthan has been starting the Inland Waterways project for the last many years. We all know that rivers have been used for transportation since ages. The 2017 status report of Manthan, it notes that in earlier times, we shaped our boats to fit our rivers. Now we're shaping our rivers to fit the size of our vessels. I'll quickly introduce what the National Waterways Act is. It is an act which is passed in 2016, and what it does is that that it has declared 106 new national waterways in the country. That's how we have 111 national waterways on Indian rivers, in addition to the 5 previously declared national waterways, which are visible in different colors in this map. These waterways were earlier declared through separate acts in the parliament, but the National Waterways Act has given this push for inland water transport development in the country with the new additional 106 national waterways in the country, which means that these waterways are to be developed and regulated by the central government for the purposes of shipping, navigation, and tourism. If you look at the slide, they are also important from the perspective of international connectivity. For example, there are plans to connect Nepal to Bangladesh through National Waterway 1 on Ganga. Bhutan is using National Waterways, the National Waterway 2 on Brahmaputra, small section of it to transport stone chips to Bangladesh. There is already connectivity between India and Bangladesh, mainly to transport fly ash, which is a toxic leftover of thermal power plants in West Bengal, which is transported to Bangladesh. And also this connectivity, the protocol routes between India and Bangladesh is also proposed to be providing connectivity between National Waterway 1 and National Waterway 2. There are also plans to connect Myanmar and West Bengal, the Kolkata Haldia port through the Kaladan project. The national waterways are claimed to be cost-effective, environment-friendly, and sustainable mode of transport. And this claim is mainly on the basis of how much bulk cargo water transport can transport using very little fuel in comparison to other modes of transport. But other impacts, and in fact, this claim is not adequately assessed with regards to what are the impacts in the underwater domain and what does cheap or cost effectiveness actually means with regards to viability. This is also considered safe mode of transport for hazardous cargo. Traffic congestion could be reduced, road accidents could be reduced, employment generation can be increased. These are the claims of the government, but let's understand what are the primary requirements of converting rivers, creeks, canals into national waterways. For an average 1500 capacity vessel, you would need a fairway or a navigation channel of 2 to 3 meter depth and 45 to 60 meter width on average. And this is not present in Indian rivers. It requires periodic interventions like dredging, Bendaling, river straightening, all of which have environmental impacts, which we'll look at in the coming slides. Water is essential for national waterways, and it has to be ensured for parts of the year. Many of the waterways, there is provision that this water availability will be ensured by existing or proposed barrages or dams. The associated infrastructure, terminals, storage facilities, approach roads, these are created, but also grander sort of visions of freight villages, logistic parks, multimodal villages are also introduced with the waterways development projects. When we look at environmental impacts, one thing which really props out is dredging, which is an integral component of waterways development. The impacts of dredging include turbidity, underwater noise, which can impact gangetic dolphins, impacts on riverine morphology, ecology. It can really destroy aquatic habitats. It can affect fish population and thereby impact livelihoods of fishermen. Since many of protected areas and eco-sensitive regions are also present on national waterways, like the Vikramshila Gangetic Dolphin Sanctuary or the Hilsa Sanctuaries, Sundarbans themselves, these impacts could be even more dangerous. There are also risks from emissions from vessels, leakages, accidental oil spills, accidents, bank erosions, also the construction of grand infrastructure required for waterways development. They can also have risk because they handle hazardous cargoes. In addition to this, land acquisition for freight villages, relocation of fishing sites, restriction on fishing vessels, impacts on local livelihoods, all these are emerging concerns which are coming out when we speak of national waterways development in the country, wherever they're operational. If you look at this image, this is an image of dredging done in Brahmaputra River, and we could see that two charts are created within one day of dredging activity in Brahmaputra. And this is how disposal is really maintained by after doing the dredging activity, which is disposing it in the another channel, or on the other side of the river, which is not going to be used for fairway. This is a sort of remaking of the river as we speak, artificially. These are sort of plastic which has come out of dredging activity in National Waterway 3 in Kerala. I think we'll hear more about it in Shripad's slide, so I'll just skip it. We've also seen that disposal of dredged material, demand for extra protection, dredge spoil, and this is all noted in IWAI's annual report, that all these issues have led to frequent stoppages of works, litigations by local people, and objection by fishermen, meaning all of these communities are getting impacted because of the infrastructure which is getting developed in the rivers for waterways development. We can talk about this slide more in discussions, but I want to highlight that in 23-24, 133 metric tons of cargo is moved on all of national waterways, and this is going to be increased to 200 million metric tons by 2030, according to the Maritime India Vision 2030. But just take a look at the cargo split, which is there on national waterways. If you look at it, this is data from 23-24. You can see that coal, fly ash, iron ore, and iron ore fines, these are the predominant commodities which are getting transported here. If you look at it, this is how it looks when you're looking at this quantity of coal getting transported on a narrow tidal stretch in Amba. This is the picture we took in November 2023 during our field visit, and you can see how uh, this coal, we could see this coal on the river. We've also heard many instances by the local fisher folks there, and they have told us that they have impacts because of this coal movement. They have impacts on the fishing breeding sites, they have impacts on fish population, availability of fish species, and so on. I think Rishika is also there in the audience. We've also seen uh, a series of fly ash laden barge accidents in the National Waterway 97, which is the Sundarban Waterway, the cargo of which is also calculated in National Waterway 1. So all these accidents taking place in eco-sensitive stretches of the river, these are also an emerging sort of concern which is there with regards to operation of waterways in the country. If you look at the where this cargo movement is mainly concentrated, we can see that most of it is concentrated within the tidal stretch of the rivers, which is where the freshwater and the seawater meets, and which is also the most productive zone of the river ecosystem. And this is where most of these toxic and so-called dirty cargo are getting transported in the river ecosystems. In addition to that, we also have luxury cruises, seaplanes, other sort of cruises which are coming up in the along with cargo movement on the waterways. And all this is happening without any independent scrutiny of what is happening in the underwater domain. What kind of impacts are there? What are the provisions for safety for inland waterways development? We've also seen tenders for navigational lights, artificial lights to be installed in the eco-sensitive zone in the Sundarban waterway, and also in other stretches of the national waterways for night navigation, which is also a demand which came up in the from the cruise industry in the India International Cruise Conference of May 2022. All these impacts are not really assessed or really understood. What happens when you introduce a lot of artificial sound or artificial light in the river ecosystem, and this needs serious consideration. The only silver lining in this whole project is that of the Earth Ganga, which is mainly which is focused or tailored to cater the needs of the farmers and small traders and villagers. Uh, but but raising community jetties for these people without having any meaningful consultation or actually understanding the need of these communities, how effective this whole program would be, I think that needs a sort of a relook in terms of understanding how this is going to take place. In terms of key concerns, we have environmental impacts coming out of various interventions, and I would also like to highlight here is the fact that inland waterways, although dredging was included in the EIA notification till 2017, but after 2017, all sort of dredging activities, especially the maintenance dredging activity, is exempt from environment clearance, from the requirement of environment clearance, although the expert committee of the MOEF in 2017 had recommended the entire set of interventions for inland waterways to be included in the EIA notification as category A project. There are also social impacts which are not adequately addressed, and they need to be relooked at. There is very little or low awareness, and there is very little or meaningful consultation with the communities which are dependent on river ecosystems, and this needs to be enhanced. At the same time, there is a tussle between the needs of the locals versus the private interest, which are the things that the government of India should work towards. And we feel that the needs of the locals is what the entire program should be catered towards. And then the financial viability of this project also needs a relook, and this is what we will hear from Shripad sir in his presentation. I think I'll stop here. Mansee, over to you.
Thank you so much, Avli, for really giving us a glance of what's going on there and specifically from the environmental perspective. So one part I learned from you is that the economics and the policy is actually focused on livelihood and giving, more and more business across the countries. But the other side is also the darker side of ecology. But I think we will have more discussion on it afterwards. But let me just invite Shripad Dharmadhikary with a brief introduction of his, and then I hand it over to him. First of all, thank you, Shripad, because I've been really wanting this session with you for a long time. So Shripad is an activist, researcher, and coordinator of the Manthan Adhyayan Kendra that studies water and energy policies, programs, and projects. His interests include rivers, dams, hydropower and irrigation, environmental flows, inland waterways, water privatization, and coal-based power generation and its impact on water. A graduate engineer from IIT Bombay, he was earlier an activist for 12 years with Narmada Bachao Andolan. He's based out of Pune, and he is a member of the Forum of Policy Dialogue on Water Conflicts in India and also on its steering committee. He writes extensively on issues of water, environment, and development. He's currently on a break to pursue writing to bring together some of the key learning from his work. So in that aspect, we are on a similar boat. And by the way, we already had a session from Policy Dialogue, Forum for Policy Dialogue on Water Conflicts in India. And I'm looking forward to hearing your viewpoints on this aspect. Shripad, as you know, we are really talking about it for the very first time. Over to you, Shripad, and we look forward to having you.
So thank you, Mansee and Wednesdays for Water for giving us this opportunity to share our studies and thoughts on this project, which is being pushed as a kind of a flagship project by this government, the Inland Navigation Project. Avli has already given us a brief overview of the project, and I will be focusing on one particular aspect, though there are serious implications for the environment, there are very serious implications for the livelihoods of the fishing community and several other implications. I want to focus on the economics of this whole project because that is really also being pushed as the major advantage of this project. So let me share my screen so that I can also show some Okay.
Yeah, we see it.
Yeah. So let me first, yeah. Okay. So give me a minute to adjust it. Yeah, okay. As Avli has mentioned, the entire kind of focus in terms of the water inland navigation has been that it's a very cheap and environment friendly mode of transport. And the kind of impression that is given is because India has this, many thousands of rivers and canals and other water bodies that we can suddenly convert all of that into very cheap transport mode, and that will really give a big boost to the economy and so on and so forth. And therefore, this program has been pushed as a flagship program. Now, it is really very important to look at this whole hype. It is not as if we are saying that there should be no transport of water, no transport by the rivers, or we should not use the rivers for navigation. In fact, it has been done since centuries. But since centuries, the focus, the whole inland navigation which has been occurring has been focused on much smaller distances, trying to meet the needs of local communities, local people. But the kind of transformation that is envisaged now is to have very large barges and very large vessels addressing, the needs of large corporate users, bulk goods like coal and iron ore, and also 5-star cruises, 7-star cruises. So the entire vision is to gear and change the nature of what is happening there. And it is being billed as very cheap and economic. So we will examine this whole issue of this main advantage which is claimed for the waterways. So first of all, there are two concepts, something that is cheap, that is less costly, and something that is viable. And I think both these concepts are very important as far as the navigation, inland navigation is concerned. And we'll look at both of this. So it is cheap, claimed to be cheap and economical, but the cost or the cheapness is only one element of viability, which is a much broader concept, and that is the concept that we need to understand. Now, why is the inland navigation being projected as cheap? The basic at the core of this is a concept that the fuel cost for transport on water is much less than, say, the fuel cost for transport on road and transport by railways, which are the other two modes of bulk transport. And this is a small table which we have extracted from an official report. And you will find these figures everywhere in all the official documents, that for transporting 1 ton of goods through 1 kilometer, it costs ₹1.36 on railways, 250 on the highways or the roads, and the inland water transport can do it at just about ₹1.06, so much lesser. Now, this is an important thing. This is the core of their argument. First of all, I think it's important to see that whereas inland navigation does offer a significant advantage as far as roads are concerned, it's not that different from what the railways are offering. So I think it's, the first element of the why the cheapness is hyped there already. Now, what are the cost advantage? Really, is it really their unique selling proposition, or is it a hype? In reality, we feel that this advantage in fuel cost is a much hyped up thing, because the fuel cost is only one part of the cost of transport. There are many other determinants of the total cost. And for example, in the case of inland navigation, whether the movement is happening upstream or downstream will have a significant impact on the how much the fuel is used and the fuel cost. The distance traveled, and I'll come to this later on because that is an important part of the comparison. One of the most important issues in terms of cost for the water navigation is that you have to transport the goods from the origin to the destination. And if origin and destination are not on the river front, or they are not on the river or the navigation channel, then you have an additional cost of transporting the good from the origin up to the waterfront, loading, unloading, then transporting again from the waterfront to the destination, loading, unloading. And this kind of handling and multiple transport also increases the cost quite a bit. The cost of the navigation is also dependent on the availability of the depth. If there is a higher depth of water, then you can use larger vessels and the cost of the fuel is lesser. But most Indian rivers don't have that kind of depth of water. So if you're, not able to have that size of vessel or the depth of water, then the cost again can go up very much. The terminal and handling costs we have already discussed. And most important is that there is a cost to maintain the waterway. Avli has talked about it, and you really continuously need to keep dredging the rivers to ensure that the required depth is available, that the required channel is there in the river with the required depth. And that becomes very, very costly. And this is particularly so for the rivers in the Indo-Gangetic plains like the Ganga and the Brahmaputra or the Kosi and so many others where this is being planned, because these rivers have a very, very heavy silt load. And so they need continuous dredging. So therefore, in actual practice, the costs can be considerably higher than just this kind of a kind of a lab kind of a comparison where you say, oh, the fuel cost is much less. Now, to give you an idea of the distance, here is a map of the National Inland Waterway 1, that is the Ganga Waterway, which is the waterway from Allahabad to Haldia. Now, if you see, the cost of transport per kilometer is less on water and on road it's higher. But the distance by road from Haldia to Allahabad is only 900 kilometers, whereas the distance by water, because the river doesn't go in a straight line, the river goes in its own meandering way. So the distance by waterway is 1600 kilometers, which basically means that even if per kilometer cost is less, you can often end up having a much higher cost to transport the goods on the waterways. So now let's just look at the issue of viability, which is just something which is beyond just the cost of the transport per kilometer. So the factors in viability, convenience and ease, and we will look at all these factors in detail in the next slides. Reliability of the waterways, speed of transport, especially for perishable goods, this is an important issue. Safety of the transport of the vessel, of the crew, and the relevance and appropriateness. In case of the inland navigation, all these are very critical issues. So we'll look at these issues. So hydrology and flow patterns of the Indian rivers is a very important thing. As we know, most of the Indian rivers are fed by the monsoon or some of the glacial melt fed rivers. But the water flow is not uniform in the years. Sometimes we have very heavy floods and then we have very low flows. And therefore, the consistency of the depth and availability of water is not there. So the reliability of the navigation can be affected. In the drought years, you have shallow water and the difficulty in maintaining the depth. Siltation is a big issue already. I have mentioned that. And in the drought years, you have the shallow channel, which becomes narrow during the dry season. Recurring siltation and disposal of the dredged material is a problem which Avli has talked about. The other important issue is that vertical and horizontal clearances are required. See, our rivers are not there only as navigational channels, right? They are used by many people. So you have jetties and you have bridges and you have water supply schemes. All of these are there in the rivers at various levels, and they can form obstructions. They can form, obstructions which need to be removed, and that can create their own problems. So for example, older bridges, if you want to develop a navigation channel, older bridges with lesser height need to be demolished and higher level bridges need to be constructed. All this adds to the cost. The speed of the travel is a problem because of, especially in case of perishable cargo. So all these are issues in the overall viability of the inland waterways. Channel shifting is a big issue in some of the rivers in the Ganga Gangetic plains. Just to give a small example, this is the Ganga River in Patna. And if you can see, there is a pontoon bridge. This is a bridge made, laid on a pontoon and is used as a, used by the local people all the time. But if the ship needs to cross this, then this bridge has to be dismantled. The ship has to cross and again it has to be, assembled. And this can take a couple of days. So this is, and there are many such pontoon bridges on the Ganga in this region. So these are the type of navigation obstructions which need to be looked at when you're talking about the viability of the waterways. Then there are other set of issues which are social environmental issues. Avli has covered some of them, so I won't talk too much about them. But there are conflicting uses of water because, for example, sometimes to maintain the flow of water for navigation, you require water to be released from dams upstream. And that can have a conflicting use with irrigation and other uses. Fishing is the use which is the maximum conflict because once you have large scale, big vessels navigating in the river, the fishing is impacted. Fisher community cannot access the navigation channels. Their nets are broken. So these are a lot of big issues. Then there are also safety issues for fishing vessels, for some of the smaller vessels to cross, and even for the bigger vessels. Avli has shared a picture of how the barges carrying fly ash have had series of accidents. As I earlier mentioned, the issue of the door-to-door delivery or the origin to destination can make the water transport very inconvenient. And then there are environmental problems. Environmental problems are a huge issue. We'll just focus on just a couple of things. The environmental problems can be two types. One is the pollution and the problems in the river causing a problem for the navigation. And as Avli has shown that photo of the plastic, when we were there in a field visit in Kerala, the officials of the IWAI who maintain the channel and who run the entire waterway, they told us that they are really frustrated with the plastic in the river. They were dredging just 100 meters, just 100 meters of the waterway was dredged, and they found several tons of plastic. And this makes dredging very difficult. The plastic gets caught in the propeller of the vessels. So, the vessels cannot navigate, and this is creating a problem. On the other hand, the dredging, the movement of the vessels causes lots of problems, including release of toxic material, turbidity, leakage of oil, and also there are very serious environmental issues, which is a big issue in the viability, and unfortunately, they are never properly examined. The presence of other competing modes of transport is a big issue, and even though the claims are there for the navigation to be cheap, actually the other issues, other modes of transport are more convenient and often therefore cheaper. And the reliability is a big issue because we have seen off and on because of low depths of water, vessels are getting stuck and then they cannot move for days. Often when there is flood, then the vessel movement has to be stopped. So the reliability, that if you say that in this particular day, I want a vessel to leave and reach the destination 100% of the time, it may not happen. So the reliability is a big issue in the viability. And of course, what the long-term impacts of climate change will do to our rivers and therefore to the vessels is a big issue. The IWAI recognizes all of this and has noted, but it is in their internal documents. This, unfortunately, is rarely examined, especially the environmental and social impacts are rarely examined in the viability documents, and the hype continues, and that is a serious problem. Just to give one last example, and then I will stop my presentation. This is a photograph in the Mahanadi River in Odisha. As you can see, this is a fisherman laying a jal. It is called a byad jal. It's a net, type of a net, which is laid on the sides of the river. And when the tidal water rises, then the fish are caught, and then they can catch the fish like that. But this entire activity will be stopped because this entire channel is going to be converted into a fishing channel. I'm sorry, is going to be converted into a navigation channel. So these are the kind of impacts which, when you talk about the viability, then sometimes only the financial viability from the angle of the, transport is looked at, but the larger viability is not looked at. So the last couple of slides, interestingly, when some of these critical issues are to be addressed, then they can lead to higher cost. And of course, the prime example is dredging. Because there is lack of depth, the navigation is not viable, so you do the dredging, but dredging increases the cost, and so therefore it becomes viability becomes difficult. If you want to address the other kind of impacts are not on the cost, but maybe on the environmental side. For example, typically today the navigation can happen mostly only in the daytime, unlike say the railways and the roads where navigation can, the transport can happen in the night also. So there is a big demand to have bright lights in the river. Avli has mentioned this, but having these bright lights can have a very major impact on the environment and ecology in the river, and that is not looked at. So the dredging can impact the fish, but providing the lights can also impact the fish. So this is how, when the whole lighting is done, then what can happen, we can see. So why are all these issues important? This is my last slide. So what the lesson here is that the low cost is actually not really low, because it's not just the fuel cost, but lots of other factors are there which determines the total cost. And I'm talking about the financial cost. So when you talk about inland navigation, then it doesn't mean that every instance of inland navigation will be low cost, even though the fuel cost itself may be lesser. And if you look at the issue of viability, which is a much bigger concept, then the viability is also not given. So they are not a universal characteristic of inland navigation or river navigation, and they are not intrinsic to water transport per se. Rather, the cost and the viability depend on specific circumstances and on what are the specific conditions. And therefore, inland navigation may be viable and low cost under certain circumstances, and it may not be viable at all under certain circumstances. And here we are talking both about the financial viability, but also about the larger viability in terms of social and environmental viability. So inland navigation can provide some advantages and be the preferred mode under certain situations and not under others. Unfortunately, this is not the way the government is going about it. It is rather going about it in a very hyped up manner. And that is the big problem. It's so important to recognize that hype and hyperbole cannot be the basis of planning. Only realistic assessments can be. And that's the main issue that we want to say. For every navigation planning, there has to be a realistic assessment of the actual financial cost, the viability in terms of the economic viability, the viability in terms of the social environmental impacts and social environmental cost. And of course, there has to be a complete participation of the local communities. All of this is absent. And therefore, we are saying that the whole basis of the planning of the inland navigation is seriously flawed. I'll stop here. There are more slides, but I think we will take some of them up in the questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Shripad. Thank you so much. And importantly, just touching even one aspect of it and focusing on the financial viability, you really raised an interesting point that the hyperbole or the hyper cannot be the basis for planning. And the fact that everything is about economy, and if it is also not economically viable, then there's a serious question. Because as I was also going through the policy, I really went through it to see where is the environment factor, where is the aquatic biodiversity factor in. Are we also putting the cost of losing something into the cost of it? I don't know. But it's a good time to invite our young discussant today, Yogesh Upadhyay, who is a PhD student in the geography department at Bloomington, Indiana University in USA. In his doctoral research, he is going to explore how differently situated actors in Uttarakhand relate to experience, use, and sustain waters, and how these relationships have changed over time. Previously, he has worked with Himdhara Environment Collective and Manthan Adhyayan Kendra, where he studied the socio-economic and environmental impacts of large-scale river infrastructure projects. His last job was at IIM Ahmedabad, where he worked as teaching assistant for around 2 years, and he holds a master's degree in development studies and sociology. So, Yogesh, you heard both the speakers, and you know you have to have some interesting questions as a representative of citizens. So over to you, and please throw your questions, and I'm sure Shripad and Avli are ready to take them on.
Thanks a lot, Mansee, for inviting me for this wonderful session. And also thanks to Avli and Shripad for sharing their insights that they have gathered over several years of work on inland waterways now. And I would also like to invite other members who are listening to this interview, or this session rather, to also share their questions in the chat box, which then I can pick up later. But just to allow some breathing space to everyone, maybe I can, because I've been assigned this task, so I would take the advantage of it and
Please.
and I have a couple of questions myself. So I'm going to begin with my own questions first. Yeah. Um, I'll start with Avli's presentation. So Avli, I noticed that your very first slide, or rather your second slide, was about national inland waterways. And over there you talked about inland waterways and also national inland waterways, which happened with the coming of National Inland Waterways Act. So I want to understand what is the difference between the two, and are there any political consequences to having a National Inland Waterways Act, and then like changing the nature of inland waterways from just being inland waterways to national inland waterways?
Thanks, Yogesh. Interesting question, especially because of the frequency of the usage of national waterways in our talks. I think it's a very important question to address. I think generally speaking, inland waterway would be any navigable channel in the inland waters. But when we are talking about national waterways or national inland waterways, these are basically declared in the Act of National Waterways Act 2016. So whatever other stretches mentioned there, which include five previously included waterways, plus the 106 new waterways whose limits have been demarcated in the Act. Those are to be called as national waterways or national inland waterways. And these are national inland waterways, meaning that central government through Ministry of Shipping with Inland Waterways Authority of India is responsible for the regulation and development of the declared national waterways. I don't know if it clarifies the question.
It does. I mean, I'm also thinking if in this case, then the state and the center, do they also come into conflict at points? And how is it resolved then if that occurs?
Absolutely, absolutely. If you read the debates in the parliament, like you would understand that it wasn't like a smooth process. Although many of the states did give names of the stretches of the rivers which are to be included in the national waterways, but there is a sort of a tussle. Like for example, if we look at the uh, waterways, national waterways which are declared in Goa, and if you talk to the active citizenry there, they will call it the nationalization of rivers. They will not call a national waterways. They will use the phrase it's the nationalization of the rivers. And the second sort of concern which is raised in the latest, I think, Rajya Sabha committee report, it said that because there was no because now that they have declared so many national waterways. I think Shripad sir also mentioned that almost 63, like more than 50% of the national waterways are not even viable. So now that they're declared national waterways, the committee report notes that they have become they're sort of getting abandoned by the state also, because they don't know whether they can act on it, whether they can rejuvenate that water body. So the
Right.
jurisdictional problem is something which is there, and this is not only a nation and state sort of a thing, not only a center or state sort of a thing, but also within the departments that there are various confusion as to how to fix accountability, how to have different because water, as we know, like it gets used and managed by different set of communities. So how do we set jurisdiction and accountability in this process? That's also very important.
Right. Oh, great. Thank you. Thank you for that explanation. Yeah. I do have other questions, but somebody has already posted a question, Rishika Pardikar. So Rishika, can I please invite you to unmute yourself and pose your question?
Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Yeah. Hi, Emily. Thank you so much. Just one question. not a question. I wanted to elaborate on the accidents. What kind of materials were these barges carrying? Um, have you noticed a trend in terms of what kind of materials do barges that get into accidents usually carry? And also, can you elaborate a little bit more on the cruise ship plans? Because I know that there has been some reporting. I've only reported on accidents, and also other journalists have done it. But cruise ship plans are not being scrutinized in media as much today. So, can you elaborate a little bit more on cruise ship plans also?
Yeah, Rishika, as you know, like many of these accidents, and we have tracked the fly ash accidents almost together. Uh, Many of them, which happened in the Sundarbans, Sundarban was mainly carrying fly ash, which is a toxic residue from the thermal power plants in West Bengal. Many of them were carrying that, but we've also seen incidents of barges with stone chips getting into accidents. There have been accidents with regards to uh, passenger ferries also in Assam. Um, Also in Kochi, we've seen almost like near collision with a chemical laden barge and tourist boat. So those sort of news have been reported, and that is the source for tracking the accidents on waterways. But mostly these are toxic or hazardous material, and if they're not those, then there are like passengers which get impacted. So either way, like when I'm talking about fly ash laden barge, it also carries fuel and lubricants and other sort of toxins which can also have the possibility of leaking into the river ecosystem. So yeah, like that's my response. Shubha sir, do you want to add anything to this?
No, I think this is quite comprehensive. Of course, there are so many details, but I think we can.
And can you also elaborate on the cruise ship plans?
Yeah, so cruise ships, like as we've seen, they're the ramifications of the Inland Waterways project. When the national waterways, they were getting categorized in terms of their viability, it came out that more waterways were viable for tourism than for cargo transportation, which is I think, and also there have been there has been like a sort of internal sort of business people who are getting very interested into these luxury cruises, which run only in a seasonal manner, mainly led by Antra Cruises, Raj Singh. And because of this 52-day long cruise, which was really like hyped up in the media to the extent that there are now like influencer stories that we notice of cruises being advertised as a sort of main focus of national waterways. So more than 25 national waterways are slated for tourism development. Many of them will also see some seaplanes coming in, water aerodromes. And the whole sort of plan is to whatever is the capacity right now, and we don't have the numbers after 2020 unfortunately on the CARDI portal, but whatever is the number in the new reports, they have said that they are going to increase it 8 times, eightfold. So yeah, like it is going to come up in many of this thing, and we have seen like even the small tourist boat, uh, the sort of destruction that even a small tourist boat can do to a river ecosystem is what we have seen in the Bhoj wetland in Narmada. But also like there is a need to review the safeguards which are not there, like even in the Harit Nauka guidelines which have come up to regulate cruise tourism. They also don't talk about any sort of environmental safeguards or independent scrutiny. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Rishika, for asking the questions. And could I now invite Shishadri ji to please come up and pose their question? They can unmute themselves
Can
and
you
then pose
hear
the
me?
question.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. First thing is my sincere regards to both Shripad ji and Avli. I know them for quite some time. See, shipping. I've been in shipping for nearly five odd decades. It has got its pluses and minuses also there, but it is all for us to learn. And we have got now certain very good examples of temple towns having solar boats, solar cruises, and we are coming in the world limelight of having something like 10 nearly 20 odd waterways in one go, and that's a very plus thing. We never heard about it. We only used to have a handful of waterways and only handful of towns having waterways, and all have been using these waterways to the fullest extent, especially Kochi. You ask anyone from Cochin, you say if the waterways stop, what happens? It is all plus. So it's all for us to learn. It's a few years now. We will learn, and we will learn for the better. And of course, they always say that fail is something like first attempt in learning. So this we should carry on forward, and I wish all good wishes to all who are trying to promote inland waterways, and it should be done because we are a maritime nation. 8,000 kilometers of coast. Who can ever think about it? And 40 odd minor ports and 20 major ports and so many fishing harbors, and this can definitely be a plus on the employment side also. Thank you very much. Okay, my question is
Yeah,
my question
please.
is, okay, we have been having certain very good examples. Why can't we take those good examples and make it better and do the best? This is my question.
Yogesh, over to you. Yeah.
Yeah, so this question can be addressed either by Avli or Shripad, whosoever wants to take this up.
Okay, let me respond to this. First of all, I'll say, Shishadri, the answer to your question probably is people like you who can give it much better because of the experience that you have. So I think that, and I think also important point you mentioned is to draw the many lessons from this and, to make sure that we have a program that is viable, a waterways program that is viable and equitable and sustainable. So I think it is very important, and that's exactly the kind of things we are trying to say, that we need to draw those lessons. But the problem is, I think, and which is what I mentioned in my last slide, that the planning of this program is actually being done on a basis of a hype and hyperbole, rather than looking at actually the experiences, facts, and doing it in a manner where you learn the lessons. That is one part. And second part is doing it in a manner that then your single-minded objective and focus should not be just to kind of promote this large vessels and large transport, but to see how it can really benefit the local communities, the small traders, small farmers, because they have been also the ones who have been using water transport for millennia. I mean, and especially like Kerala, Bengal, Northeast, these are the places where it has been thriving. But how to then make it, first of all, address the needs of the local communities in a better way, to make their, boats and vessels of better designs, how to make the navigation there safer, more efficient. I think if we bring this in, then we can do that. And also, if we want to run bigger vessels, then how we can do it with minimum amount of destruction of the riverbeds through dredging. How can we align it more to the existing natural flows of rivers and the existing natural depths of the rivers? These are the kind of approaches, if we can use, then we can definitely make it more sustainable. But for that, that element of proper assessment has to be brought in. You cannot plan on the basis of hype. You have to plan on the basis of reality, transparency, and involving more and more stakeholders. And one thing is there that because in fact, as a part of our work, we have been interacting with many people in the navigation industry also. And actually, they themselves are frustrated with what the government is doing. They are saying that the subsidies are misdirected, the efforts are not being made, we are not moving anywhere, you know. So that part is also there. And we have also been interacting with fishing community people, with the local boat people in places like Varanasi. Yogesh himself has done a very interesting study there. And they are also seriously impacted. People in the Amba waterway, the fishing communities there, the local people, everybody is seriously impacted. Now, so what is the situation where both the sides are being seriously impacted like this? That needs serious thinking, and that can happen when it is a open discussion which involves everybody, and that is what we are pushing for. Interestingly, I'll just end this response with two small points. We have seen two different responses to this from the IWAI and the government who's promoting this program. Without saying so, that a lot of these waterways are not viable and they may not work. Actually, they have also said so. There is a slide which I have not shown where the IWAI are themselves have agreed that out of the 106 waterways which were declared, 63 are not viable either for cruise or for cargo transport. So that is, they have already said that, though again, it is hidden in one of the official documents. It's not a part of the public discourse in a big way. But there are two responses that we have seen happening. On one side, they have also promoted this newer initiative called Earth Ganga, which is trying to look at the National Waterway 1 in the Ganga and promote it to meet the needs of local communities. So they have this community jetties and all that. But as Avli has mentioned, they are doing it in a very, very bad way. Again, Yogesh has also studied part of that, so he could also maybe add, I don't know how much time we have. The second response is also very interesting. Because cargo often is not so viable, you are trying to introduce this big 5-star and 7-star cruises, which per unit of passenger is, high value add. And so you are seeing more and more efforts to push this kind of things. And I think both are not the correct responses. You need a much deeper response. And which can be evolved through a more open, transparent process, bringing in all the stakeholders in a meaningful manner and looking at social, environmental issues, other issues of viability. So I'll stop here.
Yeah, thank you. I want to thank both Sheshadri and Shripad for their question and answers.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. Mansee, I will have to take leave because I have a class about to start, which is about to start. Yeah. So I would leave the stage to you. But before leaving, I could invite Eklavya Prasad to please unmute themselves and pose their question.
Thank you, Yogesh. Must congratulate Shripad and Avli for having pursued this issue for such a long time and giving us all the gyan which is not there to be consumed. My question, after I heard Avli and Shripad's presentation, my question is that what exactly are the reasons why the state continues to pursue such a national level plan despite incidents pointing towards its unfeasibility? And I'm largely coming from East India's perspective.
Avli, would you like to take the question from Eklavya? Thanks, Eklavya, and good to have you here. Over to you, Avli.
No, I would like to pass it on to Shripad sir.
Okay, the
So
viability part.
I think a lot of people here are also engaged with this kind of issues where this is part of, I think, the same approach where we are very interested, or we are very happy to promote big infrastructure and big sounding solutions, in spite of knowing that often they don't deliver and often they are very costly, whether it is large dams or in Eastern India, these large embankment projects for flood protection, which actually aggravate floods. So I think it is just one more link in that whole series where people are very enamored for both the reasons of, making a big showcase of large infrastructure projects, which look very, and that whole thing sounds very grand. It has a lot of money involved. So of course, a lot of money is available for all kinds of things there. Whereas a more pragmatic and a more rooted approach may not be so glamorous and so grand. I think it's a part of that whole vision, and therefore we see repeatedly these kind of projects running into problems where they run out of funds, they don't deliver, they leave a trail of mass destruction, both of displacement and destruction, and yet you keep pushing these for some gains. And of course, the other thing is certain people and certain sections of the society do benefit from it, and it is these big interests also which drive these projects. And of course, there is a nexus between these interests and the political power and the people who are in the decision being posed. So I think it's a part and parcel of this political economy of development. That's how I would put it, to use some jargon.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much. Yeah. Thanks, Eklavya. Thank you so much, Shripad and Avli. I have small questions before we conclude the session, and I am aware Yogesh has left, but that should not stop me to ask my own questions to both of you. So I will first ask Avli about factoring the environmental impact when the overall impact is studied on. Because whenever we see the impact, we are often looking at the financial viability or the economic viability, which we also read today or heard today from Shripad, that also is not that rosy. And this large is bold, and big is beautiful and bold. All these narratives are more political economy. How much in real time in the inland navigation are these factors? Because I'm keeping the governance question for the next session on 18th, as you have agreed upon to help us find speakers, because we are going to have the part 2 of this series. Is there any factoring of the cost or the benefits into looking at the environmental? Over to you, Avli.
As far as the DPRs we have seen so far, the detailed project reports of the projects, one thing is for sure, the cost benefit and the whole accounting of the DPRs, and also because these are really old sort of reports. The newer ones do have some sort of factoring of the environmental issues, but that also is not done in a proper way. It seems like it's more done on paper and not executed on ground. But mostly the DPRs, and because the social and environmental costs are really hard to measure, and because there is no long-term monitoring, no assessment of these projects, that these talks are not even for example, I'll just give you the example. There is a frequently asked question list of mainly how to understand the National Waterways project, mainly the Jalmarg Vikas project, which is the World Bank funded project on Ganga. In that FAQ, if you read all of the questions, there is one particular question on what is the impact on environment because of these projects. And rather than addressing some of the impacts, there is proper denial. There is just one word answer saying there is no impact. In fact, in the latest parliamentary session, this question was again raised, that what is happening on the environmental impact assessment, what is happening on in terms of environmental impacts of these projects. Again, there is the same question, that these projects are environmentally benign, these projects are helpful for the environment. So pushing these issues under the carpet and just eye washing it with sort of saying that these are sustainable projects, and not really addressing these projects in the mainstream narrative, these issues in the mainstream narratives, is the thing. Like there is no sort of amalgamation of social and environmental impacts, in adverse impacts in these projects so far.
Thank you, Avli. And you talked about social environmental. So actually, I'm going to get Shripad on board here because whenever we are doing these large infrastructure projects, and I want to draw a reference from building dams. You know, when we started them, the major impacted people are the people living near the dams. Simply put, you know, just to cut the story short of 100 years. But likewise, you were also mentioning about the fisher folks. Avli also mentioned about the fisher folks. So when the economic evaluation of the project is happening, again, my question remains very similar to what I was asking Avli. Actually, in the chat box, I just reversed the people's name. I don't know why I would have completely different name to the questions. How are we actually factoring local economy vis-a-vis the state or the जो GDP में add करेगा, so on and so forth, the flamboyant part of it, and to add to it, tourism is also overhyped economy for now because the rising scholarship of tourism is also telling the environmental impact. So over to you. How much of local economy really benefits out of it if the fisher folks go out of business? How are we calculating? Are we providing them alternate business? Is that calculated? Alternate employment? Because I see like from riverfront, which is there in Ahmedabad, I see the only people who are interested of benefiting are who are making those infrastructure. After doing the infrastructure, the beneficiaries are not there, as I heard from you as well. Over to you. Please unmute
So,
yourself.
yeah, let me just quickly respond to it. Essentially, this assessment is not done. You see if you look at the DPRs, the detailed project reports, and we have looked at DPRs of many of the projects of this national inland waterway projects. Essentially, at most there is some lip service. There is, in a 200-page DPR, there may be 1 page of environment, which typically says, oh, it will be very nice, and this is environmentally beneficial because it uses less fuel, climate change, we are mitigating climate change. Either
That's a
that,
relative
something.
environment. That's a relative environment vis-a-vis land and air.
Yeah. But and then they'll say, oh, it will create jobs for the local people and all that. But very, no mention of that. Just to give you an example, so Avli had mentioned that we have been tracking the development in this National Waterway 10, which is the Amba River in Maharashtra. We have done 2 field visits over last 5 years and been in continuous contact with those people there. The DPR says, the whatever other assessment reports have been done, they say there is no fishing really of any, significance over there. Whereas according to the local people, there are what, 3,000 fishing families or 3,000 boats? How many are there? Yeah, 3,000 fishing boats. Huge number of fish. And it's a tidal estuarine zone. How can there not be fishing? But the DPR and all the official documents merely say, oh, there is no significant fishing. So it's a complete lie. And this is true of the kind of environment impact assessments, social impact assessments, which are there with all the infrastructure projects in India. So I think it is nothing new, but it is still shocking when you see that. So that's why we are not saying we don't have to go ahead with this, but unless we do the right assessments, how will we learn the right lessons and how will we design our programs then to be sustainable, equitable, and really viable? That is the important thing.
I think it's a good way to, thanks, Shripad. It's a good way to end the conversation for today. I remember the line which Avli started with. Earlier, the boats were designed to fit the river, and now the rivers are getting designed to fit our tourism or boats. And a very classic example is that we want to do tourism out there or we want to do cargo. And that's a classic line to really reflect everything put together. But we do wish to discuss it more, especially the governance aspects of it, the conflicts coming over it, the management of it, who benefits how much, what is the share and all. And both Shripad and Avli have agreed that they are happy to help us find speakers for the next season as well, because it's all also about educating ourselves. And I want to pick a line from Ajit sir, where he said that, yes, we historically, we have been very efficiently doing water navigation. If we look at our old civilizations, it was part and parcel of our, our being. So maybe there are more sustainable ways, but just writing Harit water, what is that word? I forgot the word, but Harit navigation, green navigation does not make it green. And my concern is blue navigation. If the fishes die, who is ensuring that the fishes are rejuvenated? And dolphin was given as an example. But I think there are many more things to discuss, and 1 hour certainly is never going to be enough. So as I mentioned, we are going to continue with this discussion further and specifically focus on the governance and management of aspects of it on September 18th at 5 p.m. And we are going to announce the speakers very soon. Do remain in touch with our website and social media links for that. But for now, before I close the session, I also wish to announce next week and some highlights of the next month. So next week, Wednesdays for Water, we are again having a very interesting session on August 28th, and which is also part 1 of the session where we talk about water laws and policies in India. And we have people from Supreme Court coming and helping us enlighten for the session. We shall continue with Monday Munching and Musing with Women for Water to acknowledge and appreciate women in the water sector and their endeavors. And we have a very interesting session coming up in Friday Waters and meet a maestro, and we are going to meet the father of integrated water resource management, Dr. Peter Molinga. He's going to join us from England and talk about moving beyond integrated water resource management. And that's going to be on September 13th. But before all these sessions, I'm also very pleased to share, and I shared it in the beginning as well. I'm super excited to go and present on the first talk show at the World Water Week in Stockholm. And we are going to present with Water as an NGO from UK and supported from Aeronero. And we are going to talk about disaster-led distresses, and we are taking both man-made and natural disasters and seeing how women get impacted and what is the pattern of impact in different kinds of disaster. That's on 25th of August at 10 a.m. CST, which is 1:30 p.m. IST. So do look for it and do check our social media accounts and website for all these details which I mentioned, and also all the previous sessions which have been happening here. We are inching towards 300 sessions very soon, within 2 weeks. So all these informations are there at www.w4w.in, and do keep checking us and do support and encourage us in this way. All we need is your little pat on the back and coming here on our session and asking us questions, and also asking questions to our experts. Thanks once again to Avli, Yogesh, and Shripad for taking out time for us. Do take care of yourself, and we see each other soon. Thank you so much. Goodbye.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye. Bye. Thank you.